because it's kind of hard to understand, you know, the different agencies involved in all the various aspects of immigration. We'll of course do the Know Your Rights information. I go over how to plan for a potential emergency, emergencies related to immigration detention and potential deportation. A note about fraud, fraud related to immigration cases, and also some resources from you. So everybody who signed up for today's presentation, we got your email address so that we can send you a copy of today's slides and some other resources. So you're not being added to any sort of email list or anything. It's literally just the one time of sending the copies of the materials from today. Okay, next slide. So a quick note before we begin. So the information in this presentation is not intended to be any like direct legal advice on somebody's particular situation. Everybody's, you know, facts of their case, everybody's situation is different, you know, depending on what exactly happened in your life and what your history is. So we definitely encourage you to schedule an appointment either with us or another agency to get some one-on-one private confidential legal advice on your particular case with an attorney or somebody who is working directly with an attorney such as a legal assistant like Veronica. You are welcome to ask questions during this presentation either through the chat or through you know, unmuting yourself later. If you do have questions about your own your own personal situation, please don't ask those here because this is not a confidential space. So we encourage you to, of course, like set up that appointment, but then only ask more like generalized questions here. So don't reveal like your own personal immigration status or your own personal situation with regard to, you know, your immigration history stuff. All right, next, please. All right, so Veronica's going to take it over from here for a little bit.
Hi everyone, again this is Veronica. Before I start, just Tessa, I'm hearing a bit of feedback. I don't know if it's just on my side or it's on your side. Alrighty, so a little bit about CARECEN. We're in Los Angeles and our mission is just to empower immigrants by defending their human and civil rights, but also working for a social and economical justice environment. Below is our website and our Instagram page. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Tessa and I. We're part of the CSU project. We have services on Mondays and Wednesdays, and it's both for CSU CI and CSUN. Due to COVID, we're still doing everything remotely, so it would be via Zoom or over a phone call. Our project services students, faculty, and staff members in all the CSUs. Services are also provided to immediate relatives of students, faculty, and staff. Immediate relative being parents, children, spouses, and siblings. All other relatives such as uncle, aunts, cousins, they can go through our main program through CARECEN, and then at the end we'll like list how you can make an appointment. And we provide several immigration legal services, and we'll also provide a few more details of what types of services we do towards the next few slides. However, we don't provide services for international student visas or employment-based visas. We do have referrals, but we don't do services on that. And we also listed our project's Instagram page. Next slide, please. So services we do on the CSU team, DACA renewals, both initial and renewal, family-based petitions, citizenship applications, which is called naturalization, special immigrant juvenile status, U visas, VAWA, removal defense, and more. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Veronica. Is the feedback still there? Like, can you all still hear me okay?
I hear like fuzzy feedback, but I don't know if everyone else does.
Am I still like able to be like heard clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly, Tessa. It just sounds like a little weird, but it's fine.
Okay, okay, cool. Yeah, I can like hear it in my head. It's really strange. It feels like fuzzy. If it gets worse, let me know. Okay, so a little bit about the immigration enforcement system. So if you know your three branches of government, immigration actually touches all three branches of government. So legislative, because obviously there's laws that are passed related to immigration. The executive, which of course is the president, they can make decisions and certain like certain actions related to immigration, and then of course the court system as well. People can go through the court system with relation to immigration. So it kind of touches every area of all of the branches of government, but the ones that we're kind of focused on today are under the Department of Homeland Security. So under the Department of Homeland Security, we have Customs and Border Protection, CBP, USCIS, and ICE. So a lot of people kind of know maybe ICE or they or what it used to be called, like INS back in the day, like pre Bush 2. So they kind of know about ICE, but they don't really realize that there's actually different agencies that kind of make up all of the things that we normally see on a day-to-day basis with immigration. So first, CBP, those are the people that you would be interacting with at ports of entry. So an officer at the physical land border, or an officer that is like housed in an airport that's like checking to make sure that when you get into the country, they're checking your passport, checking your visa, etc. So these individuals check to make sure you're there lawfully, or kind of make the decision on what to do with you next if you have not entered lawfully. There is Citizenship and Immigration Services. Those are the ones who we deal with a lot when we're processing, submitting applications. So they are the ones who process the applications that we submit to immigration. So if we're doing a DACA renewal, if we're doing a family-based petition, this is the agency that we're sending those applications to. They have the ability, just like CBP, to refer cases for deportation. So if there's a case that's denied, or somebody who's entering the country unlawfully, they do have the capability of passing that information along for potential looking into like a deportation case for the future. And then of course there's ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They're the ones who actually carry out the enforcement action, so they're kind of known more as like the police arm of the immigration system. So if somebody is detained in jail for some criminal case or something, ICE issues what's called a hold. So they'll put an ICE hold on that individual if there's somebody who's undocumented, or somebody that they are trying to remove from the country. And it just kind of means like, hey, you can do your criminal case situation here, but like we need to do something with them too. It's kind of like a little bit easy way to explain it. So they kind of tag the person as somebody that they want to do some sort of immigration enforcement with. And then they're also the ones who kind of decide, are we detaining this person, or are we releasing this person like from like physical detention. So individuals who have passed criminal convictions, individuals who are completely undocumented, those people are more at risk of being deported, especially like if you're somebody who previously has an order of removal. Like maybe somebody had an order of removal where they went to an immigration judge, the judge ordered them to be removed from the United States, but then that person didn't actually physically leave. So if ICE detains them, or if a local law enforcement agency detains them, and ICE finds out and puts a hold on them, that person can be removed again later without actually having that person go to court again, because they've already been ordered removed. They just didn't actually do it. So then ICE would come in and enforce that and make that actually happen, and carry out that action of removing that person physically from the United States. So immigrants facing deportation may be detained anywhere in the United States. There is no recognized right to government-appointed counsel if you are facing, oops, sorry, a little pop-up came up and so I can't read this slide, I'm so sorry. So if you're facing deportation, you have the right to ask for a lawyer, but you're not in a situation where you have a right to be given one if you can't afford one on your own. So like a lot of times you see on TV and like regular criminal cases, somebody might not be able to afford an attorney. So the court will appoint them an attorney to represent them, so that the individual doesn't have to pay for the attorney. It's paid through like the system because they have the right to the attorney. You in the immigration system have a right to talk to an attorney. You have the right to hire an attorney and have one represent you, but the right is a little bit different. So if you can't provide an attorney for yourself, they're not going to give you one. So DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is under the executive branch of the government. But of course, like I mentioned before, the immigration touches all three branches of the government. And next slide. So this is just a little infographic to kind of illustrate a little bit of what I was saying before and kind of gets a little bit more into like the immigration court aspect of it. So there are certain things that that trigger deportations. So maybe there was a raid, like an ICE raid at somebody's like factory they work at or something, or if you're traveling in and out of the country and you come to a border checkpoint, or you're driving and you get pulled over for speeding and they find additionally that you don't have a license, and additional other issues come up to where ICE could later get involved or find out about you being detained in some way. But also if you apply for a green card or citizenship, like if you're proactively applying for something with USCIS. So these are some potential ways that you could trigger issues happening where deportation proceedings, removal proceedings could be initiated. Of course, detention can sometimes happen where you're physically detained and physically placed in like a jail or a detention facility. So sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the situation. There could be a bond hearing where if you're detained, you might be eligible for a bond where you pay money essentially to prove that like you're not gonna flee. You're not going to flee if you're let out of detention until you can have your court case. Within the immigration court system, there is like the main immigration court, the Executive Office of Immigration Review is what it's called, EOIR. That is where they handle most of the hearings that you kind of hear about and see about with regard to immigration. If you lose your case at that stage, there's the opportunity to appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals.
Tessa, you cut off. We can't hear you, Tessa.
On the last slide where you already have, oh, sound cut off. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I got a little, thank you for letting me know, whoever popped that up. I got a little thing saying my internet is unstable, so sorry guys. So I'll go back just a tiny bit. So under certain circumstances, DHS may try to deport you even without sending you to court. So an example of that is what I previous slide of if you already have an order for removal and you just never left the country, that would be an example of when they don't need to send you to court again. They've already done the court part. They just need to effectuate the order. So actually make it physically happen. All right, next slide. Okay, so now the actual rights. So now you kind of know what world we're in. No matter what your immigration status is, it doesn't matter if you're completely undocumented or if you were born here, American citizen, every single human being has rights. And in order to protect yourself, you should know what those rights are. Of course, all of us get stressed out if you're in a situation where there's either an ICE officer or a police officer, or something is happening where you're in this like really stressful situation. You might completely forget what those rights are. And that is totally fine. That is totally normal. We can freeze up in stressful situations. So what is better for a lot of people is to carry what is called a red card. A red card, you'll get a copy of this with the materials that we send you today, but a red card basically kind of lays out what your rights are on a little card that you can keep in your wallet, keep in your pocket. It lays out what your rights are, as well as what statement you can say to an officer about, you know, I am invoking my right to remain silent, et cetera, which we'll get into in a second. So that if you do have one of those panic moments and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do, you can just hand the officer the card and you're invoking your rights. So, so it's definitely good to, of course, know the rights, but have that as a backup plan, because we all kind of, you know, have the chance to freeze up in a stressful situation like that. All right, next. Okay, so if ICE is outside of your home, one of the very first things to note, do not open your door. So to be allowed to enter your home, ICE actually has to have a warrant, and it has to be signed by a judge, or you have to give them the permission to enter. So, so you want to make sure that you're asking them if they have a warrant and that they show it to you before you open the door. So they might say, oh yes, I do have a warrant, open the door and I'll show it to you. No, because they could construe you opening the door as you know, you inviting them inside, essentially. So you can ask them to slip it under the door. You can go to a window and tell them they can hold it up to the window. But usually the ICE agent might not actually have an actual signed warrant by a judge. They might have something that kind of looks a little bit like a warrant but isn't exactly that, which we'll go over in a couple of slides. And so I can kind of show you what is a real warrant for the purpose of, yes, they can actually enter your home and arrest you, versus what is just says the word warrant on it, but isn't actually permission for them to enter your home. So to be valid, the warrant must have your correct name, address, and be signed by a judge. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to answer questions. You may also just say, like, I am invoking my right to remain silent. I am staying silent. And then actually continue to stay silent. They might still keep asking you questions, and you can just keep being quiet or keep saying, I'm choosing to remain silent. And then you don't have to say anything about where you were born or how you entered the US. You don't have to answer any of those questions. You can say, again, I want to remain silent, but also that you are wanting to speak to your attorney. So one of the things that I remember learning in law school is that you have to be very clear about this, because sometimes they could say, oh, well, it wasn't very clear that they really wanted to talk to their attorney. So if you say, I think I want to talk to my attorney, that can be construed as, well, they didn't technically ask to talk to their attorney. So you want to say, I want to speak to my attorney, and make it as clear as possible so it cannot be interpreted you know, in another way, you know, for being too vague. And one really important thing is do not sign anything unless your attorney is present, unless your attorney is explaining to you what it is, because a lot of times they might say, oh, you need to sign this for this reason or that reason, and it could not be what the page is actually for, or they might not fully explain what the consequences are. You really need your legal representative to give you the pros and cons of signing whatever it is, and really explaining to you what it is that you're signing, because the officer, whoever you're speaking with, may or may not fully give you all of the details on that. So don't sign anything. Say that you want to speak to your attorney, and you do have that right to remain silent. And of course, do not open the door unless you're able to see, you know, that the signed warrant by the judge. Okay. And next. Okay, so this is what a valid warrant looks like. So up at the top, you'll see that it is issued by a court, so it's a United States District Court. This one is for the Eastern District of California. It doesn't have to be that exact court, but it'll say up at the top that it is from a court. There'll usually be like an attachment, like if it says like see attachment, whatever, or sometimes it might be written in there instead of see attachment. It will say the name of the person and the address. So it would have like your name, your address. So it actually has to have that information and be accurate. And if it just says see attachment, then see attachment. And then it also has to actually be signed by a judge or magistrate judge. So looking at the bottom and making sure that it says a judge's signature. And of course that it actually is signed. And next slide, please. And this is something that, see how it says warrant for arrest of alien? People see that and they're like, oh, it's a warrant. Well, I mean, kind of halfway. But this is not really, this isn't giving them permission to like come into your home and arrest you, sort of thing. So this is something that is issued by the Department of Homeland Security and is not issued by a court. It is signed, well, this sample doesn't have an actual signature in place there, but it's signed by an immigration officer. They are not a judge. They are not a magistrate judge. They do not have the authority to make that sort of like official legal warrant for arrest. And next slide. All right, so if there is a raid at your workplace, so ICE must have the employer's consent or warrant to enter a non-private area. So yeah, so basically the biggest thing to know if ICE enters your work area or your place of business is do not run. If running can be viewed as like you're admitting guilt, like you're admitting that you either committed some sort of like crime or that you shouldn't be working there. So it can be construed wrong, even though maybe in your nature you're a runner. What is it? Fight, flight, freeze. Maybe you're one of those that's, flight, you get scared, you run, try your best to kind of overcome that natural instinct to run. You are allowed to walk to an exit, and if you're stopped, then you can ask if you're free to leave. So just like if you're like being arrested any other time and you're not really sure if you're being arrested or not, you can ask, am I free to leave? And then that can kind of give you a little bit more clear of an idea of if you're being under arrest or not. So if they say no, that you are not free to leave, then you can kind of invoke those rights that we talked about in the previous slides, like I choose to remain silent. I want to talk to my attorney. Don't tell them where you're born, that sort of thing. So if they ask you to stand in a group according to your immigration status, you can choose not to move or move to an area not designated for any group. So you don't want to like move to an area designated for a US citizen because that could be construed as, like you're lying and pretending that you're a citizen, but you can choose not to move because that can, that's sort of, that action is in a way like not remaining silent, if that makes sense. Sorry, there's a big siren going by, so hopefully that's not bothering the sound too much. And you don't have to show any identity documents. So make sure you're not showing any sort of false documents. Do not lie to them. Of course, providing false documents to ICE may result in some other issues, so like criminal charges on like fraud. It can result in other like immigration issues to provide false documents. So make sure to not provide false documents or lie to them. But again, highlighted for a reason. You can say, I choose to remain silent. And then of course, I want to speak to my attorney. All right, next. All right, so your rights in a car are really kind of like a lot of the same thing. So yes, right to remain silent. Yes, it's a good idea. Show them your driver's license. If you're asked, show your car registration and proof of insurance, but you still have the right to remain silent about everything else. Immigration, so like ICE, and of course the court system can use anything that you say against you. If you're a passenger in a car, you can ask if you're free to leave. And if the officer says yes, then of course, like we said on the previous slide, calmly leave, don't run. When you run from the police, it looks as though there's like an issue. um, so you typically are to like allowed to use your phone and take photos and notes about the stop. But of course, there's always issues with what the officer kind of will allow you to do versus what the law says that you're allowed to do. So be safe, be respectful, and of not only of yourself and the officer, but whoever it is that you are with, because you don't want things to get out of hand and get scary and that sort of thing. Of course, again, if it's in one of those scary situations, your body's going to do what your body's going to do, but just try to keep calm, try not to run, be truthful, but again, remain silent as much as you absolutely can, ask to speak to an attorney. And then it says, you know, think twice before signing anything, but definitely if you do not understand something or you don't want to sign it, or you're like, no, I just really want to talk to my attorney before even considering signing this, don't sign it. So if an officer asks to look inside of your car, you can refuse to consent the search. But if the police generally believe that your car contains some evidence of some other crime, then they can search your car without your consent. So there are certain rules about when an officer can look in certain areas of your car, which is kind of like outside of the scope for today, but sometimes they can search your whole car without your consent. Sometimes it's really just what they see through the window. So just kind of keep that in mind. So sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. Any arrest or prolonged stop by a Border Patrol requires probable cause, so requires them to like reasonably believe like some sort of crime is being, you know, is taking place or something like that. So you could ask the officers about their basis for probable cause, like, why did you stop me? Like, why do you think something is going on, essentially? And they should tell you, but as we know, what the rules are don't necessarily always play out exactly that way in reality. And so in the situation, the driver and the passengers have the right to remain silent and not answer. So again, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff again. So, you know, kind of over and over, right to remain silent, stay calm, don't run, talk to your attorney.
Tessa, somebody has their hand up in
Okay.
participants.
Sure, yeah.
Ale, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add something about this because, you know, I used to do Know Your Rights too. And one of the things that we would say is talk about talking, you know, it's kind of hard to be openly undocumented sometimes, but if you can, in a way to have your friends and whoever you're around with, you know, in solidarity with you, because when you're pulled over, they can ask to see everybody's, you know, identification. But let's say for me, for example, I lost my California ID. And so the only thing I carry at the moment is my work permit. And that's one of the things that can be seen to out you as being undocumented. And so one of the things that I learned was that, you know, talk to your friends. And if they ask to see everybody's ID, and let's say everybody shows their ID except, you know, me, then that would be a huge, you know, indicator. Oh, like she's undocumented. She doesn't want to show her ID because she's the only person not wanting to show their ID. And so if nobody shows their ID, then that's a way to you know, remain in solidarity with your friends. That's it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it's one of those things too, it's where like you want to stay in solidarity with your friends, you want to protect your friends, but at the same time, like if you're in that situation, you might be scared and just go ahead and show your ID anyway, not to like as a way to like out your friend, but as a way to protect yourself too. but yeah, that's definitely a good point, is whenever you have those situations, like even if you're a passenger, it doesn't matter if you have a driver's license, you're not driving, but they can still, you know, ask for the ID. So so that's definitely a good thing to keep in mind. And, you know, absolutely, like the unity, the sign of solidarity is wonderful. But yeah, okay, and next slide. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit from like knowing your rights to, okay, now something has happened. What do we do? How do we make sure we're prepared for that event when these things happen? Okay, next slide. Okay, so where to start? So first off, even before anything happens, before you've had any interaction with ICE or police, you want to find out what your immigration options are. So you want to speak to a licensed attorney or an accredited representative, or like, you know, like we have Veronica, who's a legal assistant that works directly with a licensed attorney. So somebody who actually has the licensing, or is, you know, working closely with somebody who has the licensing to be able to give the legal advice. So find out what those options are. Sometimes people think that they have no options, and then they talk to somebody and they're like, oh, actually I do have you know, eligibility for this or that or whatever, that can lead to potentially even permanent relief for them. So first step, talk to somebody. So if maybe you're a green card holder, a lawful permanent resident, and maybe you're eligible to naturalize, or maybe you are completely undocumented but might have a form of relief like I just mentioned. So so talk to a legal representative, and then you know, whether you have an option or not, start creating a plan for you and in your family in the event that you or another family member is detained or ordered removed from the United States. And we're going to go into the like how to create a plan next. Next slide. Okay, so everybody's household is a little bit different. So if you don't have kids, this isn't really relevant for you. But if you're like me and your kids are furry cats, that's something else you would want to make sure that they're taken care of in the event that you are detained or removed from the country. So first off, if you do have human children, who would care for the children in your family? So kind of figuring out who that person is, what emergency numbers there are, important contact info. There's the caregiver's authorization affidavit that we're going to get into in a second. Just kind of making sure like who's going to take care of your kids. Do you have each other's like emergency numbers? Is there sort of like a plan of, you know, plan of attack in the event that you're detained? Like, do they know what to do? But also, do they have the legal authority to do that in your place? Next. Okay, so who would care for your children if the caregiver is detained? So like you, your spouse, you know, whoever else is taking care of the child. Like if the caregiver of the child is detained, you know, you want it to be some sort of trusted adult. They need to know about it. So it's great if you're like, oh, my friend so-and-so would definitely be a great caregiver. Well, they need to know about that because if you're detained and they had no idea that they're the person that was designated, then they're not going to know that they need to step in. So make sure that they know where the kids' school is and their school like schedule and all of that, but you also want to make sure that you have their phone number memorized so that if you are detained and you know have your phone call to, you know, make sure that the kids are taken care of, that you know what their number is off the top of your head so that you can get to them, because if you don't have access to your phone or something like that, as well as make sure that the child or the children memorize that special phone number as well. Make sure that the school has them as the emergency contact. Oh, and then also if you have a restraining order against somebody, like say perhaps the father of the children, there's a restraining order against them, make sure that the school is aware of that so that in your absence, the father is not able to pick up and take the kids instead. So just kind of make sure that the school knows who has the authority and not to be able to pick up the kids from school and make the decisions and stuff in your absence. Okay, next. Medical conditions. So if you have any medical conditions or allergies, if your kids have any medical conditions or allergies, make sure you have that information. So the kids, their doctor's information, their health insurance information. Of course, the school should know this stuff anyway, but also the trusted adult that you are wanting to be the person who steps in your shoes whenever you are detained or removed. And then, of course, let the child know as well where a copy of this sort of document is held, so that the child kind of knows what's going on. Of course, that's different for every child because, you know, different ages, obviously having this like full-blown conversation with a 2-year-old is going to be a little less fruitful than like if the child is like 14. So, so again, every child is different, every situation is different, but just making sure that you know, if the child is old enough to understand this stuff, that you let them know as much as possible what's going on, as well as a trusted adult. For me and my family, we had a password. So if for some reason my mom was unable to pick me up from school and somebody else had to pick me up that I didn't know, like somebody from work or something, they would have to tell me the password. If they didn't know the password, then I wouldn't, you know, I would know that this is not somebody that my mom actually sent. So having those safety measures in place is a good idea in general, but also in the event of something like this. And yeah, and then of course, like medical conditions, if somebody is taking care of your child, it's good for them to know, like if your child has seizures and needs to take their medication every day, that the trusted adult knows that and has access to that medication, so that they can continue it without interruption in your absence. And next. Okay, so caregivers authorization affidavit. So this is a form that you can give your child's school or healthcare provider. It allows somebody who is a non-parent relative to enroll your kids in public schools and make like important like medical decisions in your absence. So this is not something that affects your rights as a parent. You still have custody of your kid. You still have control of your kid. You're not giving your child up for adoption through this. It's just kind of allowing somebody else to have the rights to kind of step in to make some of these decisions if you're unable to be there, essentially. So somebody who can be an authorized caregiver is an adult, so somebody who is over 18. It can be any person. They don't have to be a relative. And then and somebody who completes the form, like they may serve as the caregiver. And then a non-relative will only be able to make school-based decisions. It kind of seems like the relative adults might be able to make a little bit more decisions than the non-relative adults. But just know that there's this other form that they can fill out to make it a little bit more official. Okay, and next slide. I don't know how many people actually have kids in this presentation, so I won't go like too much into the details of like the children stuff, but it's just kind of more of a way to kind of get your brain going of like what all areas of your life do you need to consider. So of course human children, but then also pets, so making sure like maybe you have a friend that has a key to your apartment and kind of knows like, okay, your pets have this medication or they eat this food or whatever, so you have a plan for the pets as well in your absence. But one of the biggest things to make sure that you do is you actually talk to your family, your friends, whoever's involved in your plan about the plan. So the plan cannot be successful if no one knows about it. So it's great if you plan everything out and you have everything in your head and you know you've got all your documents ready, but if you're the one that's detained, if nobody else knows where those documents are and nobody else knows that they're a designated person to step in, it's essentially useless. So you need to actually notify these people that they're the person, a person or people that are supposed to do certain actions in the event of your detainment or deportation. So maybe make a phone tree of like, okay, I'm calling my cousin, and my cousin's going to call the school and and like make a plan of who's supposed to talk to who. Okay, I'm calling my cousin. My cousin's going to call also my attorney or whatever the case may be. So just make sure that you tell the people who need to know, but also This can be a scary time for the kids as well. So make sure that the children know that they're going to be taken care of. There is, you know, so-and-so will take care of you if I am missing. You know, if I don't pick you up from school, know that so-and-so will get you, that sort of thing. So, because it can be scary. So we want to make sure that the children don't have, you know, have the least amount of trauma and harm from this event. Okay, next. Okay, so how can my family or attorney find me? So this is something that can be a little bit tricky. So say you're arrested and you're taken to some sort of jail, and ICE puts a hold on you, like I mentioned earlier, and ICE, you know, has their eyes on you about potentially removing you from the country or putting you in the courts, the immigration court system. There's this website here, and again, you'll be getting copies of the PDF of this presentation, but this is the ICE detainee locator website. This is where somebody can search for someone to see if ICE has a hold on somebody and like where they're physically located. This site is great, but also has some flaws. So I used to do a lot of volunteer work with a family detention center in Texas, and so I used to use the ICE detainee locator like literally hundreds of times a day, every single day, and so I got a little too familiar with the problems that it would have. So when you're looking somebody up, you need to have their A number if the person has an A number. But if the person doesn't know your A number, or maybe you didn't have an A number before, and an A number is an alien registration number, so that's your identification number with immigration. You can also look somebody up by their name, date of birth, and country of birth through the website. But the problem with that is your name has to be written exactly the way that ICE has it written in the system. Otherwise, you're not going to show up. It doesn't matter if the date of birth and the country are right. If the name is not right, it's not going to show up. So what I've seen before is maybe, you know, somebody has two last names and ICE put their last names in flipped. So put the second last name first. Even though everything else is right, if you put in their name correctly, they're not going to show up because ICE has their name flipped. Or maybe they do have their middle name in there or don't have their middle name in there. So you have to make sure that if you're trying to find somebody that you kind of do a few variations of their name when you're trying to search for them. The best thing is to search with the alien registration number, the A number, because then you don't have to worry about the whole like weird name thing or like, oh crap, I forgot their birthday or something like that. So, so that is definitely one of the things that you want to make sure that the people in your emergency preparedness plan know, is that they know your alien registration number. Another thing that that people can do is kind of look around on a lot of websites. A lot of like jail websites will have inmate lists. So they kind of, you know, showed like name and or photo of who is currently there. And so you can kind of find people there. But one important thing to note about that too is they're not updated instantly. So because they're, oh, is somebody asking a question? So, hello? Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I think somebody accidentally unmuted themselves.
Okay, cool. So I couldn't tell if they were like, if they were just unmuted or if they were asking a question. So thank you. Yeah, so making sure that you have this information, but then also with with the webs. Oh yeah, now that's what I was at. Sorry. So with the websites, they're not updated instantly. So maybe your friend might be, or family member might be detained at one particular jail. You look there, their name isn't there, so you think they're not there. We'll check again in a half hour. Maybe it'll be listed. Same thing with the ICE detainee locator. What I've personally noticed is a lot of times they don't show up on the ICE detainee locator until the following day. So just because somebody's not showing up there doesn't necessarily mean ICE isn't going to have a hold on them. It just means at that moment it's not showing that they have a hold on them. So, so just know that there is that delay, but those are two good places to start when you're trying to figure out where someone is when you know that they've been detained. Okay, next slide. Okay, so important documents list. These are just some examples of documents to have. Everybody's situation is different, like we mentioned multiple times, so all of these aren't necessarily going to apply to you, but just make sure if they do apply to you that you have them. So like I said, that your alien registration number, if you have any immigration documents, like if you have any cases pending or anything like that, like maybe you filed an application and it's pending, like have that together, any sort of IDs together, emergency numbers together, your birth certificate, any like official documents. You want to make sure are in a safe place that another trusted adult has access to. And of course, like making sure safe place as in not just safe as in like it's, you know, safe from somebody stealing it, but also safe as in you don't want it like on the back porch where it's going to get rained on sort of thing. Like safe from other like water and things like that, because I've definitely had people where maybe there was like a flood in their house or something, there was something that happened to the house and their documents were destroyed, so maybe like a little personal lockbox or whatever you need to do. Okay, next slide. All right, and Veronica's going to take it over again. Veronica, you're on.
Thanks. Also, it's just important to save money, and not just only for in case of an emergency, but let's say you are detained, you will need possibly to cover some legal fees, and legal fees being maybe like fees that go along with an application, depending if you have a private attorney, maybe legal fees for a private attorney. But if you're with an organization, maybe they have a small fee, maybe they don't, but just saving some funds for just in case. And also in case the household loses income. So if because of the absence of the person, maybe there's no income coming in or very few, little amount of income coming in, it's important to have that saved as well. Next slide, please. It's also important to just be very cautious, like only attorneys and accredited representatives are approved to give legal advice, immigration advice. And there's also a lot of like fraud, and it can be from notaries, like immigration consultants or tax preparers, and they're actually not able to determine if you qualify for a work permit, indicate if you have like what immigration forms you're supposed to fill out, or answer any questions. So it's just really important to keep an eye out for that. I know for most people, maybe in their home countries, notaries did do a bit of like legal advice, but not here. Here it has to be an attorney or accredited representative. And then just them giving you answers is legal advice, so just be careful who you talk to and consult and try getting advice from. Next slide, please. So how can you make an appointment with CARECEN if you're a CSU student, faculty, or staff, or an immediate relative? We listed the website to book an appointment. And again, immediate relatives would be spouses, children, siblings, and parents of students, faculty, or staff. If you're alumni, unfortunately, we don't count that as CSU affiliation, so you would go along with the general public, and in order to do an appointment there, we provided the phone number and a website to see what other services CARECEN does. However, if you're at a student at a community college, there's also the possibility that a community college can help you, but that's only for students, faculty, and staff. Next slide, please. Where else can you find help? So let's say you don't live in the LA County area, or you live in another state. We listed a website where you can look up organizations who do immigration legal services. We also provided a list of federally recognized and accredited nonprofits that do immigration legal services across the country. And it includes private attorney referrals. And then there's a way you can just check like lawyers that should be avoided due to maybe like discipline issues or other issues. So that website is there as well. Next slide, please.